Hey cake sniffers, and welcome to my channel. My name's Amanda. Today we're going to be talking about the reading goals I had for my son from like 0 to 4 months. Those first 4 months I was pretty busy with a newborn, so my goals are coming afterwards. Reading goals for an infant aren't the same as they would be for an adult because it's not just making a list of books that I would want to read with my newborn. It's more about setting up his environment to be ready for literacy. So I had 4 goals during this stage: language development, home library, curating, setting up outside influences, and getting started on the 5 R's of early education. The first goal is language development. For most people, language development is going to come naturally because as we speak to and speak around and dance with and play with infants, they tend to just learn the language. They tend to just learn the language. They tend to just learn the language naturally. The reason why language development is one of my goals is because I want my son to learn both English and Spanish. I am a native English speaker, but my husband is a native Spanish speaker, so I want to make sure that my son can speak to both sides of our family. His dad works during the day, and I spend the majority of the time with my son during the day, so it's up to me to make sure that he's hearing Spanish pretty regularly. I am probably an intermediate Spanish speaker, so it's going to take intentionality for me to make sure that my son hears Spanish. If I'm not intentional about it now, it's going to be really easy for this to slip through the cracks and he won't learn the language. My second goal is home library curating. This is where the fun begins because I was able to curate a lot of books that I wanted to be around for my son to read. Other than books, I also wanted to curate music and podcasts so that we would have other forms of entertainment to listen to. That was also important when I consider wanting my son to hear proper Spanish. If I could find podcasts and music that were in Spanish, I wouldn't have to rely only on me speaking to him in Spanish since, as I said, I'm only an intermediate. The host of my baby shower asked my guests to bring books instead of cards for my son. I took it a step further and asked my guests to bring books in both Spanish and English so that I could make sure we had Spanish books around to curate that Spanish language. Some people brought their favorite childhood books or books that were simply for little babies. And other people got books off of our registry. Some books that I really love were this series. It's 365 Cuentas. We had one that is rhymes. We had another one that is just classic stories. And another one that is stories about animals. These books have been great to have around because whenever people who do speak Spanish are around, I have these books laying around and they will pick them up and read them to my son. Some of the stories are long, multi-page stories. I think this one is 2 or 3 pages, maybe 4 pages. And then some of them are as short as just a poem. This page here has lots of little stories on it. Other people just brought some books that they thought we would like this 8 Little Planets book, and also this little unicorn book. Asking for books at my baby shower was one way that I was able to curate a lot of books for my library. Before my son was born, I was working at a school. So another way that I was able to curate books was by getting books at the end of the school year from the discarded book bin. So my librarian had pulled all the books that she was removing from the library stacks and had put them on a shelf for teachers to go through. I pulled a lot of books that are this brand, this Time for Kids, but they're written in Spanish. I figured this would be a way for my son to have a varied language in the types of vocabulary he would see in his Spanish books. I also specifically pulled some books off the cart that I was interested in. For example, this book on Ethiopia and this book on the geography of Texas. We do live in Texas, and so I figured this would be a great book to read with my son, and then we could talk about the actual environment that we live in, but in Spanish. So again, curating that Spanish language development. I can also look at the pictures and talk about them in English as well, so that I'm developing both languages. Another way that our home library was growing was through people just giving us books that knew I was interested in literacy. So my mom has been sending my son books, I think since before he was born. Maybe just she brought some books to the hospital to give to him when he was born. And my mom had sent me this book. It's called Let's Discover B Words. I like this book a lot because it's basically a dictionary for little kids. And each word has a pretty vivid description of what it's about. So for example, on this page, it says, "This is Becky's bedroom. She is getting into bed. It's time for her to go to sleep." So all the characters in the B book have names that start with the letter B. So for example, there's like Becky and Billy and Bobby. They're all the characters in the B book. I really liked this book, so I went to look and see if I could find the other letters on eBay. I wasn't able to find this book exactly, but I was able to find another one very similar. So I have Let's Discover More B Words. And the great thing about this was I found the whole set together. I actually have the full alphabet of the Let's Discover More Words book series. I was able to find a few of the Let's Discover book series, but it would only be like 1 or 2 at a time, and the 1 or 2 at a time would cost the same amount as the whole set did. I think I spent $22 on the whole set of the Let's Discover More, and some of the Let's Discover I'd find $22 for maybe 1 or 2 of the books together. I was also able to get some books by going to my local public library. They have a section where you can buy books, and some of them are actually the ones you can see back here. One that I was really excited about was called Esta es mi casa, because this book has multiple different languages, and it's people talking about their house. The public library is great for book sales because I was able to get a whole handful of books for only about $20. I also wanted to curate music for my son, so I looked up a lot of children's songs and I made a playlist, and I made an English playlist and a Spanish playlist. I also reached out to friends who were raising their children to speak Spanish and asked them if they had any songs they could suggest to me. I also looked up some different podcasts for kids. There's a few that I really like: Cranio, Cuentas Increíbles, and Había una vez, Brains On, Tumble. One thing I really like about the podcast is that I'll turn on the transcript area and listen and watch the words at the same time so that I myself can pick up on some new vocabulary words. The third goal is to curate the outside influences. Curating the outside influences is mostly about curating what I'm doing during the day, since I am his primary caregiver. This whole third goal revolves around the concept of more is caught than taught. If I want my son to become a reader, he needs to see readers in his life, and that includes me. One of the main things that I'm doing is putting books on hold at my library instead of reading them digitally, so that he's not watching me watch a screen when I'm actually looking at books. One thing that I did to help with any kind of like social media addiction that I had was I got myself a second phone, and that seems a little counterintuitive to get a second phone to be on the phone less, but on the second phone that's where I put all of my social media apps. So I took Facebook, I took Instagram, anything that I caught myself just going to mindlessly scroll, I put on that second phone, and I completely removed it from my primary phone. I don't want it to seem like I'm perfect though, because I'm definitely not. I still catch myself scrolling on YouTube sometimes because I haven't completely removed that from my primary phone. Okay, I'm gonna have to finish the other goals later because I hear my son's waking up. It is many hours later and I am back here to film. Another part of my third goal is making sure that his interactions with other people are positive and going in the direction of literacy. An example of how I curate his environment is when other people come over to visit. If people come over to visit, I usually suggest that we come into this room here, which is his playroom. And I suggest that because there's lots of books that we could read. We also had a great opportunity for Spanish language introduction when we went to visit my husband's family recently. I made sure to bring this book. This is the book that we took with us. And what I did was I made sure that this book was out wherever my son was. Basically, I followed him around with this book. Then whenever anyone was holding him and it seemed like a good opportunity, I would ask them to read this book to him. I've also told any of my friends that are native Spanish speakers that I'm trying to speak to my son in Spanish, and when that happens, I've noticed that they do speak to him in Spanish. My fourth goal is just to become more familiar with the 5 R's of early childhood education. The 5 R's of early education are reading together daily, rhyming, playing, talking, cuddling daily, building routines, giving rewards for everyday successes, and developing relationships that are reciprocal. I haven't looked too much into these 5 R's, honestly, but everywhere that I would look, they kept popping up from like the American Academy of Pediatrics, different hospitals, different education systems, and so I want to look more into those 5 R's moving forward. So those are the 4 goals I had for the 0 to 4 month stage. I feel like I was really successful at library building. We have a lot of books around us and also music and podcasts to work with. But one thing that I definitely need to work on is incorporating the Spanish language development more frequently. I've got all the supplies around me. I think it's just that I hesitate because I'm intermediate. I think part of my issue is that I'm intermediate and I worry that I'm giving him the wrong words or the wrong vocabulary. I know for a fact that my pronunciation is off because my husband has to correct me sometimes with my words. I'm going to wrap it up here, but thanks for sticking around. Let me know if you have any questions, and I look forward to the next one. Bye!